My name is Michael Rubino.
I'm on a personal mission to make sure you don't get sick inside your own home.
I knew there was something wrong. I'm just so relieved there's something that you can do about it.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Never Been Sicker. I am your host, Michael Rubino, and today's very special guest, Dr. Stephen Gundry. Dr. Gundry, how are you?
Great to see you again, Michael, and hopefully I can tell you that I've never been healthier.
Great. That's really good news. So let's talk about that for a second. So first off, do you agree with the statement that as a civilization, we have never been sicker than we are today?
Well, certainly in the United States and probably North America in general, and areas of influence of U.S. culture, I completely agree that we've never been sicker, and it just keeps getting worse and worse rather than better and better.
Now, you said you've never been healthier than you are today, so that's a great news. So obviously, for some of us, we're on the right path. We're getting the right information. We're taking all the steps to improve our health, and obviously, you're doing that, right? And so you're walking the walk and talking the talk. Can you explain a little bit about why you believe that we've never been sicker, especially in North America, as you suggest, and tell us what we can do about that?
Well, I know we've talked last time I was on your show about mold and mycotoxins, and I think that's a good place to dive in. One of the things I've done through the years now. Number one, I get to study old people in my practice, and I like to travel around the world looking at these old people and old cities and old cultures and figure out what's happening there that's different than every place else. And one of the things that's interesting about us is that we, quote, have the best medical system in the world, the best medical care in the system, and yet we rank with kind of in the middle of third world countries in terms of actually overall health. And
interesting, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. So what's happened to that? Well, in hindsight, I went to medical school in the mid-1970s, back in the dark ages. And a lot of really interesting things happened in the 1970s that I personally think created the perfect storm that explains a lot of why we are sicker than ever. And they seem actually innocuous and at most miraculous at the time. So we have an amazing microbiome that I write a lot about, and so do other people. We finally realized who was down there in 2017 with the completion of the Human Microbiome Project. And we realized we could identify these thousands of bacterial species, to say nothing of fungal species, of molds and viruses, and figure out what they were doing and how they influenced our immune system and how they influenced the wall of our gut, leaky gut, intestinal permeability. And I've said for years that we used to have an amazing microbiome that did two things. Number one, there's always been a battle between plants and animals in terms of plants don't particularly want to be eaten by animals, and they certainly don't want their babies, their seeds, eaten by animals. And they have developed a impressive system of defense techniques, among things lectins, oxalates, phytates. Molds and bacteria basically hate each other, and they are at war. They're competing for the same food stuff. They're competing for carbon atoms. That's what they're competing for.
Yeah.
And so molds have great offensive weapons against bacteria. Most antibiotics were developed from fungi and molds.
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of war that's constantly going on between all these kingdoms. Our microbiome developed an ability to protect us, their home, from these plant predators, and believe it or not, from some of these mold toxins. In fact, one of the interesting things in looking at super old people, super agers, 105 years old, is that they have a diversity of microbiome, a tropical rainforest of all these guys that looks like a 30-year-old's, not a 105-year-old's.
Wow.
And number two, they have a microbiome that's really good at eating or handling xenobiotics, things like mycotoxins, believe it or not, things like microplastics. Why? Because they can eat carbon atoms. And
Right.
and so you look at them, and they've got this really great microbiome. And then you go, well, isn't that interesting? These guys are 105 years old because they've got the guys that are really protecting them from these assaults. Okay, so getting back to the mid-70s, what happened? First of all, broad spectrum antibiotics were developed, and I remember well when they were introduced because briefly we had to identify a bacteria that was causing an infection that was trying to kill one of our patients. We had to culture it. A lot of times we couldn't culture it, it wouldn't grow. And then we had to put them in petri dishes and put antibiotics and figure out which antibiotic worked. And it took several days to figure that out. When broad spectrum antibiotics was all of a sudden now, instead of a 22 caliber handgun, we now had an AK-47 with a 200 bullet load magazine set on automatic. And all we had to do was and knock down everything. Who cares who it was? They're all dead. And it was absolutely miraculous. I mean, miraculous. Now, what we didn't know, particularly when broad spectrum oral antibiotics came out, we had no idea that we were killing off most of our microbiome that lived in our gut. And we had no idea that we might not grow back a normal microbiome even 2 years later.
Wow.
So it was like this, scorched earth policy, and nothing would grow. We figured, oh, what the heck, take a couple probiotics, and it's like, here in California, we don't like fires, but we have them all the time. And the idea that a fire could burn down this forest outside my window, and we could go and plant some little seedlings of pine trees, and presto changeo, we'd have a forest again. Well, it takes 20 or 30 years to get that. And we had no idea that it would happen in the gut. So that's number one. Number two, literally at the same time, the only real pain reliever we had in those days was aspirin. And aspirin was very useful. It was used actually in autoimmune disease treatments, rheumatoid arthritis. About all we had was aspirin. But it had a real downside in that it caused stomach ulcers, bleeding ulcers. And drug companies said, there are other compounds that are in NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, that relieve pain, but they don't do any damage to the stomach. Now, they knew that they would do damage to the wall of the small intestine, but our scopes, our gastroscopes, couldn't see down in the small intestine. We could see the stomach, but we couldn't see down there. And it was very clear that you could take these things and you wouldn't see ulcers in the stomach. So they were miraculous. But when things like Advil or Motrin or Naproxen came out, it was only available with a prescription, and you could only fill that prescription for 2 weeks because they were considered so dangerous. And now, fast forward, they're the most widely sold pharmaceutical in America. We even have children's Advil. And what the drug companies didn't bother to tell anybody is that they knew that these drugs would cause holes in the lining of the gut. In fact, I tell people it's like swallowing a hand grenade.
Wow.
So, number 3, in the mid-1970s, the Monsanto Corporation patented glyphosate as an antibiotic. It was not patented as a weed killer, as an herbicide. And literally through serendipity, when they noticed, and I think the plant was in Missouri, they noticed that there was a pond where the factory threw out its wastewater. The pond didn't have any algae or any plants growing in it. And they went, interesting. Why is that? And so they realized that glyphosate was a spectacular herbicide. And fast forward, they could genetically engineer plants to resist the action of glyphosate. And you could spray glyphosate on these plants and kill all the weeds, but the plants would survive. And those were, the GMO days. And GMO became, an evil word. And, I don't eat GMO. Ooh, it's evil. But about 15 years ago, large food corporations, large agricultural corporations, these harvesting machines, huge amounts of money. And it's very inefficient to wait for a crop to ripen and then die and dry up to harvest. Traditionally, you always harvest after the crop is dead because it's incredibly expensive to harvest a wet field, the wait. And so traditionally you wait for the corn to die or the wheat to die or the barley to die or the soybeans to die, and then you harvest it. They said, we could use glyphosate and spray a conventional field of wheat or a conventional field of corn or a conventional whatever, oats, dry it, and we could control when that field will be ready for our machine. So we could schedule, let's say I've got the machine in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I want to harvest on September 1st. I'll spray that field with Roundup 2 weeks earlier, and it'll be dead and dry, and that machine will be there. And since the machine is there, then I can spray the field next door a couple days later, and so I can make this incredibly efficient, and I can control nature. So what, unbeknownst to anybody, is that almost all of our conventional grain crops and most of our soy crops and other seed oil crops are sprayed with glyphosate as a desiccant to make them easier to harvest.
Interesting.
Now, and it doesn't have to say GMO. Now, so what? Well, the government allowed glyphosate to be sprayed on food because humans, our cells don't use a pathway called the shikimate pathway. And I love shikimate. It almost sounds like you're swearing, but plants use the shikimate pathway to grow and divide. And so glyphosate targets the shikimate pathway, blocks it. They didn't bother to tell anybody, but they had patented it as an antibiotic because bacteria use the shikimate pathway. So Monsanto convinced the FDA that glyphosate was harmless to humans because we don't use that pathway. And that's why you don't have to put it on a label to this day. So they didn't tell anybody it kills bacteria. So what? So now and they don't wash the glyphosate off afterwards. Ooh, We feed it to our animals. It's in our animals' flesh. We grind it up and feed it to ourselves. It's in almost all of our food products. We spray it on our lawns. Most California wines have glyphosate in them. So what? We now have we're swallowing literally continuously on a daily basis a antibiotic by the name of glyphosate. And you can get really nerdy. Mitochondria that are our energy producing organelles are actually ancient engulfed bacteria. And they actually carry bacterial DNA. And since glyphosate targets bacteria, there's pretty cool evidence that glyphosate is really good at killing mitochondria. Ooh. So those three things, and we could go on, and these three things all happened in the mid-1970s. And so we don't have a microbiome anymore. The microbiome normally, back in the good old days, would tell our immune system, we got you covered. Whatever's coming down the pike, whatever we inhale, whatever we swallow, we'll take care of it. We know these guys. We've got mechanisms to handle these guys. Immune system, you go have a donut and a cigarette and relax. Now we don't have a microbiome. We don't have a microbiome to handle these things. We don't have a microbiome to educate the immune system. We're poking holes in our intestines constantly, and we're probably killing our mitochondria with glyphosate. And we wonder why we're so doggone sick, even though, we're the richest, best healthcare system in the world. And that's just three things. But I think that it all happened under my watch in medical school. I'm sorry.
You know what's really interesting about the 1970s? There's something else that I find interesting about the 1970s. And it's the fact that Richard Nixon was our president, and we were dealing with a global energy crisis. And what did we start to do during the 1970s? We started to push towards energy efficiency, building tighter buildings and tighter homes, regurgitating the same bacteria, virus particles, etc., from our own production.
Yeah. In the 1970s, it wasn't just bad rock music. It really is just, it's amazing. Really, that decade was so transformative. And so you're right. We've sealed ourselves into these toxic environments. And these wonderful leaky houses that we all lived in way back in the old days. I'm old enough to remember where we stuffed towels under our doors and along our windows in the Midwest to try to stay warm, which, looking back, was a really good idea. My wife's mother insisted that she always sleep with an open window in her bedroom. And she grew up in Connecticut, which is cold. And to this day, we have an open window in our bedroom, thanks to her mother. And she
great for air exchange.
Yeah, exactly. So
I want to talk about leaky gut for a minute, right? Yep. So just to be clear, are these three contributors that obviously still contribute to issues today? Are they contributing to leaky gut syndrome as well?
Oh yeah. Again, plants want their predator to not feel good when they eat plants or plant babies. They want them not to thrive. And how this happens is leaky gut. And this was all worked out by a pediatric gastroenterologist from Naples, Italy, who's now at Harvard, Alessio Fasano. And he showed how alectin, gluten, actually causes leaky gut, how it causes intestinal permeability. And designed how you could measure it and you could prove, and I do this all the time, that you can see a leaky gut. But about 80% of my patients have autoimmune diseases, and all of them have leaky gut. All of them, let me backtrack, about 80% of all of our immune cells, our white blood cells, lie in the wall of our gut. And the wall of our gut has a design flaw. It's 1 cell thick, and its surface area is somewhere between 1 and 2 tennis courts inside of us. And all that stands between us and everything we swallow, and all those bacteria and all those wonderful molds, is 1 cell. And so
Wow.
80% of our white blood cells are literally our troops stationed at that wall, because if anybody gets through, there they are. They don't have to, And that worked actually really well, because most of the time, something could get through, but there they were. They'd handle it, put down the brush fire. But now we don't have a microbiome much anymore. We're eating a lot of lectin-containing foods because we didn't learn from our ancestors about how to detoxify plant compounds with fermentation, for instance, with heat, for instance. And so now these guys are coming through the wall continuously 365 days a year. And our troops are being overrun. And they're going, oh my gosh, the hordes are coming across the wall. We can't hold them back. I feel like Davy Crockett at the Alamo. And they send out these inflammatory cytokine signals to alert the cells in our heart, the cells in our brain. There's an immune system in our brain called the glial and microglial cells, that the hordes are coming. We can't hold them back. They're on the way. Protect yourself, protect the neurons. Do whatever you can, because they're coming. And that's what we see now, that we just are awash in this chronic inflammation. And people say, well, the cause of all this problem is inflammation. And I go, and if we eat anti-inflammatory foods, that'll be great. The idea that eating anti-inflammatory foods will stop our inflammation is the same way we've learned in California of trying to stop a forest fire with a garden hose. And we've learned the hard way that you can't
Doesn't
stop.
quite work.
It doesn't work. Good luck. Good luck with that. Didn't work. And so we're all pretty much agree that inflammation is really bad for us. But what people don't understand is what's causing the inflammation that Hippocrates knew 2,500 years ago was leaky gut. He said all diseases come from the gut. And the guy was right.
So interesting. So going back to leaky gut in general, right? And we know that those 3 things that you outlined earlier, right, are not helping the leaky gut situation. But then you've been bringing up pretty much there's the plant mechanism. Plants they have self-defense mechanisms.
Yep.
Just like mold has self-defense mechanisms, bacteria has self-defense mechanisms, right? So the animals are eating the plants, right? And those plants have glyphosate, and plus the plant self-defense mechanisms. So now, I guess for us as human beings trying to thrive and survive and get like you, in the best health of our lives, what do we do? I mean, do we have to stay away from plants and vegetables? Do we eat meat? No, don't eat meat. It's a lot of dietitians out there are arguing over what's the best approach here. What's your take?
Sure. Well, one of the things I like to do is study these super old agers in these cultures and figure out, okay, how are they getting away with this? How did they do it? And maybe we should all move to Costa Rica or, mountain in Sardinia. And that's not really available for most of us, but I like to visit. But one of the things we can do is we really want to limit our access, at least initially, to these foods that have been known for centuries by cultures to be harmful to us. Our ancestors, the only way to preserve food back in the old ways was fermentation. And I mean, we had no refrigerators, we had no cupboards, we had nothing. And it just so happens that fermentation was a phenomenal way of using bacteria or molds, congee, for instance, to eat these harmful plant compounds. Again, molds don't really like bacteria and plants in general. So, and they'll feast on them. So a recent example, the Incas used quinoa as their staple, but people don't realize that the Incas didn't open a package of quinoa and boil it and eat it. They actually allowed it to rot. They fermented it, and then they cooked it. And it's not on the package directions. One of my associates was vacationing in Greece with her family, and she actually called me. She says, "You're not going to believe this. I'm having all these Greek salads over here, and guess what they do? They peel and de-seed their tomatoes, and they peel and de-seed their cucumbers, and they peel and de-seed their peppers. Isn't that interesting?" And I said, "No, these guys figured this out. The Italians, by law, will not allow tomato sauce to be made with using peel. You got to peel and de-seed the tomatoes. You'll never open a jar of Italian red peppers and see a peel and a seed. The Southwest American Indians always charred and peeled their peppers and took the seeds out before they ate them or grind them, because they knew how to detoxify these foods. Even bean soaking. Have you ever soaked dried beans to make soup?
No.
Okay, well, I was taught how to by my mother. And you always, in Tuscany, you soak beans for 48 hours before you cook them. Why? Beans have their own microbiome, and plants actually have their own microbiome on their leaves. So when you put them in water and let it sit at ambient temperature, it ferments. And you get the scum that rises to the top of the water, and it's kind of bubbly and it's thick and scummy. That's actually the fermentation. And the fermentation was eating the lectins in the beans. And then you throw out the water and add new water, and you just keep doing it until the process stops. And it took about 48 hours. And these guys were all so smart that they figured out how to detoxify these compounds. But convenience got in the way.
Convenience got in the way.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I tell people to do. We can measure leaky gut. We can study how long it takes to heal leaky gut. I was naive 25 years ago. I thought you could see a leaky gut in a couple weeks. Most people, it takes 9 months to a year to see a leaky gut. That long. It takes that long really for two reasons. Number one, you've got to rebuild a microbiome. The microbiome is really important in contributing to the health of the wall of the gut. And I've written books about it, so I won't bore you. But it's really important. And it takes an incredibly long time to rebuild that tropical rainforest. It's not going to happen overnight. And it takes a lot of work. Sometimes, the longest it's ever taken me is 4 years in a patient to seal their leaky gut and rebuild their microbiome. 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah. Now, that's the exception, so don't everybody get depressed. Yeah. But it's a process of doing that. Number two, we've learned that this is such a complex tropical rainforest that I write about in the gut-brain paradox, that each of these species are dependent on the product that one species produces by eating something. They need the product of that one bacteria to make product number 2 that the third bacteria needs to eat, and so on down the line. And it's like a car assembly line. And if one of those bacteria is missing, then you can't complete the process. Or if one of those products is missing, or if one of those bacteria needs something in your diet that it needs to make that product, the whole thing falls apart. And it's a whole lot more. We should have realized that it was very complex. Any ecosystem is incredibly complex.
Right.
I always use the example of the wolves in Yellowstone Park as a perfect example. Wolves are evil, and they're bad, and let's get rid of them in Yellowstone Park, which they did. And lo and behold, within a few years, the elk population overgrew. The elk population ate all the sapling trees. The sapling trees were used by the beavers to build beaver dams. There were no more beaver dams. The fish weren't trapped. The whole ecosystem just fell flat on its face because they removed an apex predator. They put the wolves back, these evil creatures, and everything, settled down again. So we should have realized that these ecosystems are so intertwined, and they're bad guys, and they're good guys, and you got to have some bad guys, and you got to have some good guys. So
makes sense.
And our ecosystem is just completely falling apart.
So we have our own internal ecosystem that we need to take care of, and it could take 9 to 12 months on average to restore that ecosystem.
That's exactly right. And then you throw in, I'll give you a great mold toxicity story. I have a couple in LA who have been renting a house, and this particular person goes around the world. It's a very busy person. And his wife is raising their kids at home. And they've had some real health issues, particularly since they moved into this new house, the rental house. And among other things, we did a mycotoxin panel. And they were exposed to a lot of mycotoxins. He was a big coffee chain fan. And he had a lot of coffee-based mold mycotoxins in him. So that was kind of an easy fix. And she said, I told you not to get that stuff. But they had black mold. And I'm going, well, this is good news. Your house is full of black mold. And they get a contractor in, and he says, no, there's no black mold. No, none. This is not a problem. And I went, wow, where are you guys getting that? Do you have a summer home? Do you have a vacation home? No. And I'm going, that's really weird. Let's repeat it in 3 months. Maybe we were wrong. So in 3 months, we repeat it. She's got the same levels of this black mold. He is down by 2/3. I'm going, what the heck? And I said, what was going on the last 3 months? He said, oh, I was on the road. I was probably home for maybe, 10 days in the last 2 months. Wow. And I go, well, what about your wife? She said, I didn't leave. I went, son of a gun, you just did the test. There's black mold in the house. Get another guy in. And sure enough, the other guy, the roof in their bedroom was under, I guess, a big oak tree. And of course, there was moss growing on the outside. And they opened up, and the whole thing was just full of black mold right in their bedroom.
Look at that.
And
it's interesting, guys. I'm sure you see this a lot, right? Because you see people come into the home and they go, oh, there's nothing here. And then you have to finally find somebody who knows what they're talking about or knows what they're doing. It's like, oh no, you've got a problem. I'm sure you see that a lot.
Yeah, no, it's, but that was just one of the best examples. And again, if the guy hadn't traveled a lot,
might not have known.
We might not have known. And we'd be, no, you don't have black mold. And that's why, I'm a big fan of, cleaning up your environment in your home. And since most of us spend a great deal of our time in our bedroom, that's if you can only purchase one really high quality air filter, that's probably where you put it. Where you put it? What do you think?
I agree. I mean, you're spending 8 hours a night sleeping, in that room. Obviously, you can spend other time in the rest of the house, but if you only had one, you pick it where you spend the most time.
Yeah. And I think that's important advice. Again, I'm a big fan of modern air purification systems, and and thanks to your work for alerting people that this indoor air pollution, we do see sick homes and sick
Yeah.
offices. A lot of the times, it is exposure in the office, which they've got all these phenomenal ratings for energy efficiency, and they're often sealed torture chambers.
Totally. Do you ever notice that if they're staying inside the problem and there's a lot of toxic black mold in there or something like that, that they're having trouble? It's taking longer to heal the leaky gut, or they're having trouble healing the leaky gut. Do you ever notice a connection there?
Well, and these guys, we've definitely had issues. And again, molds and bacteria don't like each other, and molds make some very effective bacterial toxins. So to me, it makes sense that if you've got molds competing against bacteria, and you're not only inhaling them, but you're swallowing them, all these spores, that you're swallowing antibiotics.
Right.
And so, this ecosystem is so delicate, and rebuilding it, it's amazingly challenging. And I think part of that is because of our modern environment, to say nothing of microplastics. And these beautifully sealed homes, there are microplastics everywhere. They're coming out of our carpets, they're coming out of our furniture, they're coming out of our clothes. Now, this is cotton, by the way. And we're just inundated with these microplastics. So what? Well, it turns out that microplastics now completely change the diversity of the microbiome. And there's some really good papers that show that the microbiome communicates with us by making compounds that are generally classified as postbiotics. And some of those compounds are gases, like hydrogen gas. Some of them are methane gas, believe it or not, hydrogen sulfide, the rotten egg smell. And these are actually messages between bacteria and us and our cells. And the average person should be making about, get ready for this, 20 liters of hydrogen gas a day.
Wow.
20 liters. And you're going, wait a minute, the Hindenburg was hydrogen gas. And you're going, wait a minute, I'm not blown up like a Hindenburg every day. There's not 20 liters of hydrogen gas in me. Well, yes, there is. Hydrogen gas is the smallest molecule there is. It is diffusible through the wall of the gut, through a cell, through a blood vessel, into the brain. There's really good papers, particularly out of Japan, that people with Parkinson's lack a hydrogen gas producing microbiome. And people who don't have Parkinson's have a hydrogen gas producing microbiome. And there's cool papers out of Japan if you give people with Parkinson's and a non-hydrogen producing microbiome hydrogen water, which is hydrogen dissolved in water, their Parkinson's symptoms get better.
Wow.
And it's one of the things I was motivated. I literally just released a new product when I realized that there's microplastics are causing a depletion of these hydrogen gas microbiome. So I just actually released a new product at Gundry MD called Ultimate H2 that it's a tablet you put in water. It's kind of like plop, plop, fizz, fizz. What a relief it is.
Yes, I have it. I take it every day.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's pretty tasty,
Yeah.
and it's a way to get hydrogen gas in you. You go, oh, come on, hydrogen gas. There's like 1,200 papers about how important hydrogen gas is to our health.
I've noticed a huge difference. I know it's great for anti-aging. You know, I've noticed a huge difference. My wife's noticed a huge difference. It's part of our repertoire now. Thanks. Thank you for creating that. Where, I know we're running out of time here, so I want to know, where can people find you? I know you're still seeing patients. So if you've got autoimmune issues, if you're dealing with mold issues, you're a great guy to see. How do people get in touch and get in touch with your office and get to see you? And then tell us about your shop and, where people can find the different products that you have.
Yeah, so my website is drgundry.com. My website for my product and food line is gundrymd.com. I still see patients 6 days a week. I've got about a year waiting list, but I founded gundryhealth.com as my telemedicine portal, and we can do leaky gut tests. So the staff at Gundry Health is trained in my protocol, and it's a way of getting me into a lot more people's homes or them into my office. And it's actually very new, gundryhealth.com. But that's the easiest way to get access to me now. And of course, the Dr. Gundry podcast. We just now went over 1 million YouTube followers, so I'm very excited about
Congratulations.
that. And I'm on Instagram, et cetera, and hopefully, if I'm not waving to you every morning as you're looking through your feeds with something, I'm doing something wrong.
No, yes, you're a wealth of knowledge. Love all of your content. You're always out there putting good information. Every time I get to talk to you, I learn something new. So it's always exciting. Thank you for all that you do. And for those listening and watching, I hope you'd enjoyed this episode. Please share it. And Dr. Gundry, we'll see you next time.
All right. Great to see you again.